Joining me now to discuss is Carl Zaw, a geopolitical analyst and host of the Silk and Steel podcast. Carl, thanks so much for taking the time to join me.
Thank you, Rachel. Anytime.
Yeah, it's great to have you back on the show. Now, I want to get your take on the latest, as I know that Trump has made it no secret about the fact that he wants the US to take over Greenland. And now he's claiming that because he wasn't awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 2025, that anything goes, essentially. So I'm curious, how do you view Trump's obsession with Greenland? I know he keeps claiming that the US needs to seize the territory before Russia does or before China does, but what do you think that this is really about?
Well, first of all, that man clearly really won his Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, he made it very explicit. He's still salty that they give it to Machado last year, and he really wanted one because he's building his legacy, and this is what the Trump's expansion is about. He's aiming to be the great American president. Well, what does great American president do? You expand America. And I bet he wants another head of his going up on Mount Rushmore too. And this is why he's going after Venezuela, and then he's going after Greenland. Um, the thing with Greenland is U.S. actually had a long historical interest in acquiring Greenland. Like back around the time of Alaska Purchase, there was a discussion among U.S. politicians to buy Greenland off Denmark as well. But at that time, purchase of Alaska was very controversial. It was called Andrew Jackson's Folly. So once they bought Alaska, they decided to stop there. They didn't really pursue purchasing Greenland. And then during World War II, when Nazi Germany occupied Denmark, the United States used this opportunity to secure Greenland, and with the permission of the Danish government in exile. And then after World War II, they also made another offer to purchase Greenland. Well, that didn't go through, but currently U.S. the stated reason for Trump administration is that we must secure Greenland for national security of United States, because the Arctic ice cap is melting, and then now more Russian and Chinese shipping are going through the Arctic Ocean, and we have to keep a close eye on that. But U.S. already have access to Greenland via NATO. There's currently U.S. base on Greenland. During the whole Cold War, U.S. have listening station on Greenland to monitor both Soviet subs and possible Soviet launch of missiles toward North America. So U.S. have the capability to access Greenland for its national security needs. But what happened now is it looks like Trump is pushing for decoupling from Europe. I mean, he doesn't care about NATO. He doesn't care about for the Europeans, because Trump fundamentally is a bully. He does not respect weakness. He only respects strength. You saw that with trade negotiation with China. When China pushed back, Trump's like, "Oh, she's my best friend," but the European leaders adopted a different approach. They have been basically bending over backwards for Trump, hoping that by complying with Trump's wishes, they will be able to preserve, kind of the transatlantic arrangement that had been in place since World War II. But that doesn't work with Trump. Trump is a bully. The more you give in, the more he push. And now he is out to build his own legacy. He wants Greenland. He wants to make America greater. And he saw that European as pushovers. He don't think there will be much resistance. He doesn't respect the European anyway. And people are saying, "Oh, okay, U.S. taking over Greenland is going to destroy NATO." But I don't think Trump cares for NATO. I do not think Trump cares for NATO or the Europeans. So he is now all out to secure the U.S. dominance in the West Hemisphere. So this is why he first went after Venezuela and then going after Greenland. This is my take.
Yeah, and we saw it in, Trump's national security strategy. And I know that he's doing a lot more than that, as he also has his eye on Iran. He's continuing this proxy war against Russia and so on and so forth. But it is interesting because when you look at the response that we have gotten from Russia and China, because of course Trump wants them to be the scapegoat. He wants to be like, oh, well, Denmark can't defend Greenland against China, so we have to get in there and do that. Well, in response, Beijing is calling out Trump for making it clear that he doesn't care about international law in regards to Greenland, but also for, quote, using the so called China threat as a pretext to pursue selfish gains. Now, it's no secret that Trump wants the rare earth minerals that are in Greenland, the natural resources, whatever he can get his hands on. But as you've noted previously, China refines around 90% of the world's rare earth. So, I mean, Trump can get it, but he's going to be shipping it to China to a certain extent. So, where does that leave China in all of this? Because on one hand, they could be getting more business, but then on the other hand, they also are sick and tired of the US and its hegemonic ambitions.
Yeah, Chinese foreign ministry basically said, quit using us as your excuse for your greedy land grabs. Stop yelling China, China every time you're trying to go annexing foreign territory. I mean, Trump used that excuse for going after Venezuela. His stated reason supposedly is to keep China, Russia, and Iran out of the West Hemisphere, and he's using the same China card on Greenland. And China's like, this has nothing to do with us. So Greenland do have a lot of rare earth deposit. Now, China was actually invited to invest in Greenland by the Greenland government, but that alarmed United States. First under Trump administration, then under Biden administration. So U.S. under Biden administration actually pushed Denmark to scrap the deal with China. So right now, there's no Chinese investment in rare earth minerals in Greenland. And Trump lies. He said there's Russian and Chinese ship all over Greenland, which is completely not. It's untrue. There's no Chinese Russian surface combat vessels around Greenland. And for submarines, and we don't know because they're in the ocean. That's as good as anybody's guess. But I don't think there's a there's any danger of Chinese or Russian takeover of Greenland. This again, whenever United States talk about China, it's 100% projection. Because it's U.S. that really want to get their hands on Greenland, both on its supposedly rare earth potentials and for its geostrategic location that's set on the Greenland, Iceland, UK gap that basically guards the entryway to the Arctic Ocean. But even the rare earth, the rare earth in Greenland is actually pretty difficult to access because much of the Greenland set under a heavy sheet of ice. And this is another area where Trump might, he has all these ideas of making America great again and grab resources, but he obviously hasn't done his homework. It's the same with Venezuela. When he sat down all the American major oil executives to talk about how they're gonna use the Venezuelan oil, and the ExxonMobil executive told him Venezuela is uninvestable. It's uninvestable because it requires a lot more upfront capital investment. They estimated it needs $186 billion over a period of 16 years to ramp up the oil production of Venezuela back to 3 million barrels of oil. And for a lot of the businesses, that first of all, that's a long time horizon. They would require a guaranteed stable investing environment, and currently that's not the situation with Venezuela. First of all, there hasn't been a change in the government in Venezuela. Second of all, Trump could go after 3 years, and then what? Then there's no way for these companies to get the return on their investment within 3 years. So business is a lot more reluctant to commit capital over a long period of time if they don't have the guarantee that they will still be around to reap the return on their investment. And that's the same deal with Greenland. So a lot of this is just Trump. I mean, people are saying, "Oh, Trump is just a He's just the tool of the American deep state. Well, to a certain extent, yes, but a lot of the other, but then a lot of that other part is just Trump trying to make himself great again, and make himself look good, because he's a reality TV show host and he knows what looks good on television. And he's also desperate to distract people's attention away from Epstein files. This is why he need to escalate one crisis to the next. First Venezuela and then Greenland, and who knows what next. He have to keep escalating, especially when the midterm election is coming. And if the Republicans lose their majority, Trump faced real possibility of getting impeached, and he will do whatever he can to stay in power.
Yeah, that's the scary part, right? And it's also kind of a reminder of why he is the perfect president for the establishment, because anytime he steps out of line, they go, "Oh, hey, remember the Epstein files? Remember what you don't want to get out?" Exactly. Okay, it's like Epstein's here just continuing his work, essentially. Now, it has been interesting to kind of watch as Trump is picking this fight with the EU right now, right? Is announcing a 10% tariff on 8 European countries that oppose a US takeover of Greenland. But there's not really much that Europe can do to stop it. I mean, they send a handful of troops. Okay, that's not really accomplishing much. But what do you make of this fight? Does it seem like a genuine break between the US and Europe? And does it also go back to kind of what you were saying before, where, hey, Trump's got 3 more years, so Europe only kind of has to hold out to see who comes to the White House in just a few years?
Well, I think that's what a lot of the European leaders were hoping for. There's the hope that, after Trump, there will be some sort of quote unquote return to normal. I think that ship has sailed, given the current political environment inside United States, because Trump has shifted the political overtime window so much that I don't think there will ever be a return, quote unquote, to like a pre-Trump normal. And this is why the Europeans have been, up to this point, up to the Trump's Greenland grab, been very accommodating to the Trump administration, even though most of the European leaders secretly well, I don't even think secretly, they despise, openly despise Trump. Yet they still, whenever they come to Washington, they set like school children around the White House and listen to Trump scold them, because they, like you say, they don't have much options. They're really scared of losing the kind of the security arrangement post-war in Europe. They feel like they need United States to guarantee security in Europe, and that showed their desperation when US said they're going to abandon the whole Ukraine proxy war against Russia and let European picking up the burden. There was a widespread panic about that too. Um, I don't. I just don't think that European have any good options. Plus, the European leaders, up to this point, hasn't really grown a spine. I don't see any sign of that. It Canada. Canada actually have more spine than European leaders by actually openly sending their prime minister to China, and Scott Carney openly said this move is to lessen Canada's dependency on United States, because they need to pivot away from US to open new trade relationship with China, Canada's second largest trade partner. Europe hasn't taken that step. This is the surprising part. It's a surprise to me, at least, that the Canadians have more balls than Europeans right now.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you bring up Canada, because I was reading about their latest deal, right? Because Canada really is the latest country to turn to China, and it broke with the US by slashing its 100% import tax on Chinese electric vehicles in return for lower tariffs on Canadian farm products, and deal with Beijing. And it's interesting because I know that we've been talking about this for months now, right? China's in this position where it almost just kind of has to wait. It puts these policies in place that says, okay, if you want to have this import tax, we're going to have these tariffs. And then it just kind of waits it out to see what's going to happen next. And it lets Trump's just crazy all over the place trade policies do the talking. So, how monumental do you think that that visit was, not just for Canada as a country, but really for breaking the mold and being willing to go and talk to China and realizing it may be time to pivot away from the US because you can't trust the Trump administration now, but whoever comes after?
I think breaking the mold, that's a big deal because I didn't in the beginning I didn't think the Canadian a pivot to China would be a big deal because let's face it, Canada is just not that important of a country. But what they did is they set a precedent, set an example. Canada is one of the Anglo Five Eye countries. Not just the member of NATO, and now that Canada set a path for potentially for the European leaders to follow. Europe should have pivoted to China a long time ago. Over the trade war with Trump. I said many times, if the rest of the world just come together and form a trade coalition, they would be able to force U.S. To accept more equitable terms. Because ultimately the economy outside United States is still larger than the U.S. economy put together. But the Europeans haven't done that. They have been very accommodating, hoping Trump will just leave them alone. But that didn't happen. And Canada's case is interesting because this has happened before. Canada back in before 2015, when Canada was under the conservative government of Harper. At that time, also because the U.S. pressure, Canada pivoted to China to open more engagement with China. But that was derailed after Trudeau, after Justin Trudeau came to power, and he complied with the U.S. demand to detain Huawei CFO Meng Wanzhou, and that made the relationship really took nosedive. And a lot of the, for example, also to make Biden administration happy, Canada slapped 100% tariff on Chinese EVs. That's what they're phasing out right now. Now they're telling China, okay, there's no reason for us to keep this 100% EV anymore because we basically had that to make the US happy. But now that US threatening to annex us, you're welcome to sell your BYDs in Canada. and in return, China is phasing out the tariffs on Canadian canola oil. So, after Canada initiated the trade war against China on behalf of the United States, China also slapped a lot of tariffs on Canadian agricultural products, and now all these tariffs are being rolled back, and Canada is also looking to sell its oil and natural gas to China. This is an area where U.S. say, "Oh, we're gonna keep China away from our hemisphere so they don't get their hands on Venezuelan oil." Well, China can buy their oil elsewhere. Now they can get their oil from Canada. This is another case where Trump administration is policies actually pushing U.S. allies toward China. I mean, Canada is U.S.'s largest trading partner, one of the closest U.S. ally, and the problem is Trump just doesn't care about that. Trump just wants to make himself look good. He doesn't care what happened to U.S. Canadian relationship. That's beyond his scope. His scope is just stay on for another 3 years.
It's Nobel Peace Prize, annex Canada, become the acting president of Venezuela. It changes every week, but then at the same time, we're still having the same conversations that we were having a year ago. So I guess we should give him some more credit for staying a little bit on track here. But it is notable because speaking of not just the impact of Trump's policies, but one of the impacts, especially when it comes to trade, Beijing just announced a record trade surplus of $1.19 trillion in 2025, a 20% increase from 2024. That comes, of course, despite a year of pressure from the Trump administration aimed at trying to contain Chinese factories with tariffs that reduced China's trade surplus with the US by 22%. So, what does the data really tell us here about the shift that we're seeing and the growth that China is seeing?
Well, first of all, there's some voices say, "Oh, the Chinese numbers are fake." Now, import export data is one of the hardest data to fake because you get both the import you get the custom numbers both on the Chinese side and from the countries that import from China. You can just compare notes. And what it show it really gives lies to what Scott Besant's claim that China needs us. China needs the U.S. consumers. The trade between U.S. and China actually declined. At one point, China was U.S. largest trading partner. Now, China is number 3 behind Canada and Mexico, and there's a 20% decline of the U.S.-China trade. But that was more than made up by China's increased export to global South countries, particularly Africa, Southeast Asia, Latin America, but as well as the EU. The trend is still ramping up. This is only the beginning. We're going to see more Chinese EV exports to the rest of the world. So really, what Trump's administration policy has been able to do is just erecting a wall around United States that wall it off on the rest of the world. But China continue to deepen their engagement with the rest of the world, leaving the U.S. behind.
Yeah, it's very telling the position that the US is in, and that's part of why they pay so much attention to all of the propaganda and the media, because they need the American people to think, no, no, just look in here, look in our little bubble, right? Don't pay attention to what China's doing, what Russia's doing, or certainly what they're doing together. Lastly, I'm curious because I know we're only a few weeks into 2026 already. Trump has kidnapped the sitting president of Venezuela. He's threatened war against Iran. He's moving US military assets to the Middle East. So a lot is happening, but what are you keeping an eye on as we get into this new year?
Well, Trump is going to visit China in April. And so that I think that itself will kind of um, somewhat stabilize the Sino-American relationship for at least the coming 3 months. I think there will not be, at least, from the side of the Trump administration, attempt to engineer a major crisis before that, because Trump, he cares about his image. He wants the visit to be successful. He wants to have a chance to do photo ops in China, in Beijing. So I think for the first, at least up to the Trump visit, we can probably expect a relative calm between the Sino-American relationship, but that will just mean Trump will seek to create his spectacle elsewhere, and one of the big hotspot is Iran right now. I actually said during the time of immediately after January 3rd, the kidnapping of Maduro, I said Iran is going to be okay in the immediate future because a lot of the U.S. military assets are in the Caribbean. It will take them some time to reposition them around, Persian Gulf and West Asia. But now that now the pieces are moving again, they just announced they're sending an aircraft carrier attack group from South China Sea toward Indian Ocean. So it looks like there are moving pieces in place right now for some kind of action against Iran. So this is a spot we'll have to keep a close eye on.
Yeah, and it's really concerning to watch as this all kind of comes together, and it feels like the calm before the storm. And I know that with Venezuela, right, they had the USS Gerald R. Ford in the Caribbean lined up ready to go for a few months before anything happened. And so it almost kind of becomes the question of, okay, once they get the pieces in place, do we see an attack on Iran then? Do we see it in, 3 months when Trump is once again claiming that he wants some kind of negotiations? A lot at stake here. Definitely an understatement all around for this year. But I always appreciate you taking the time to join me to break down all of the latest here. Carl Zaw, a geopolitical analyst and host of the Silk and Steel podcast. Thank you so much for your time and insight.
Thank you, Rachel. Anytime.
If anything in this video resonated with you, be sure to like it, share it with your friends, leave a comment. And as always, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to keep up with all of my work, make sure that you're subscribed to my page on Substack. That's rachelblevins.substack.com.